Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Haynes. I teach at Hazard Middle School in Hazard, Kentucky. The title of my project is Flipping and Swiveling in 8th. Initially, it was titled Flipping and Swiveling in 6th, but 12 weeks into the school year, as my colleagues can tell you, I got switched from teaching 6th grade math to 8th grade math, so therefore my title changed. The goal of the Flipping and Swiveling project in my 8th grade mathematics classroom is to enhance student learning and achievement by reversing the traditional teacher-centered model of a classroom to a flipped learning model, focusing class time on student-centered activities, active learning strategies, rather than on lectures. The research question I was seeking to address is, will recording lessons and posting on Google Classroom improve student achievement for students who are chronically absent? After reviewing the 2016-17 HMS attendance committee data, I noticed that there were several students in 7th grade who were chronically absent, so I wanted to focus on those 4 particular students for this project. To address this problem, I want to shift from a traditional teacher-centered model to a more collaborative, student-centered learning environment by the means of a flipped classroom in an effort to create a personalized experience for every student. To conduct the research, I acquired a swivel C3 robot, a floor stand, a lanyard, a clip, and expand lens for iPad. Recording and uploading video lessons online via Google Classroom will allow students who are forced to miss class for an excused or unexcused absence to be able to catch up quickly and learn at their own pace with the constant accessibility of the content. And here you can see my swivel C3 robot camera in my classroom, and I'm recording myself doing some online Go Math interactive examples. To address its objectives, this study considered as respondents all 56 students in 8th grade at Hazard Middle School during the 2017-18 school year. 4 of those students were identified as being chronically absent last year. And my students here, they're working on some online Go Math module questions together. And same here. Here they're doing some Boom Learning, which are some digital task cards. And here we have a student taking on the role as teacher, and she's doing a Nearpod lesson with my students. Implementation of the plan. The first thing I did was a student perception survey via SurveyMonkey, and I wanted to see how they felt about shifting from a teacher-centered environment to a student-centered environment. The survey results showed that 52% of students said they would prefer to watch a video lesson on Google Classroom rather than a teacher-led lesson in the classroom. 74% of students said they felt they would benefit from watching those lessons when absent, and 65% said they would benefit from watching prior to doing homework or preparing for an upcoming quiz or test. To evaluate the outcomes of my project, I utilized the measures of academic progress assessment results, peer observation data, and student perception surveys. The student perception survey data was analyzed to see if their perceptions had changed about the classroom environment and to ensure any positive outcomes were actually due to the innovation. I didn't expose them to a flipped classroom environment until after round 1 of the MAP test. Here we can see the data for student A. You don't see the fall data for student A because she was homebound then. But if you look at the blue bar there, you can see that she did show growth from the winter to the spring. Student B, again looking at the blue bar, you can see fall as the baseline, fall, winter, spring. Same for student C, and same for student D, all 4 chronically absent the year before. All 4 students showed signs of academic improvement in math. Looking at the whole group data, this was probably the most impressive part to me. Looking at the beginning of the year, only 31% of students were proficient or distinguished in math. Recently, we just got our spring MAP results back prior to spring break, and my jaw almost hit the floor. Needless to say that 86% of students are now proficient or distinguished. With only, yes, the last faculty meeting about died. With only 2 students being novice. So I do feel like it was not only beneficial to my students who are chronically absent, I do feel like it was beneficial to every kid in 8th grade. Peer observations. The first peer observer before project implementation, he noticed there was more competition rather than collaboration amongst my students. After project implementation, he noticed the opposite. With peer observer number 2, I'm not sure what happened to the slide there at the bottom, but he said there was more passive learning instead of active learning prior to project implementation, which I knew there would be. And then after project implementation, he noticed a lot more active learning going on. Students a lot more engaged, not just sitting there, passively taking notes, sit and get. Survey results showed after project implementation that 86% of students said they preferred to watch a video lesson on Google Classroom rather than a teacher-led lesson. 92% said they did benefit from watching those lessons when they were absent, and 85% said they went back and reviewed those lessons prior to an upcoming quiz or test. I also kind of switched it up a little bit from time to time. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Breakout EDU, the escape room for the classroom. I would record little mini lessons or mini videos of myself about 5 minutes long and embed clues in those videos, so they had to be really attentive to figure out what was the clue. 8th grade students who were identified as being chronically absent, they showed an increase in mathematics performance on the MAP test from fall 2017 to spring 2018. The number of 8th grade students who scored proficient or distinguished, as I said before, increased from 31% to 86%. Student perception survey data showed that students much rather prefer the flipped classroom as opposed to the traditional teacher-centered environment. Reflection, overall, I would conclude that it is successful. Obviously, because the higher a student achievement on the measures of academic progress test, positive feedback from my colleagues, and most importantly, positive feedback from my students. And on a final note, I would like to say thank you to ARI and KVEC for making these learning innovations possible in my classroom for the past 3 years. I would not have any of these things in my classroom without the Learning Innovation Grant. So thank you very much.